Does this prove that Lindsay Clancy was actually not alone at the time of the crime? I'm Danny, your host, and this is the very first episode of Truth Serum.
She plays it out with Bratz dolls. Patrick made a mistake, and she pointed it out, and there is literally no denying it. Blood splatter does not lie. And I need you guys to send that video to whoever you need to send it to because the defense needs to see it. Lindsay was unconscious. And there weren't even any footprints anywhere, guys. Come on. How the hell investigators and blood analysis experts missed this, I have no freaking clue. He moved the bedside table back over the blood drips, guys. He moved it back. She reenacts the whole thing, explaining every single blood drop. Lindsay is innocent, and I'm not changing my mind.
Wow.
The video is a little bit long, but please, please, please watch it the whole way through. Please.
First, I'm going to show you what she's talking about. I went and found the picture, and it's the white end table, the night bed table. And there's blood, satellite drops, which means satellite blood drops are when the blood just drops straight down, as if someone's resting above and the blood is coming straight down. Well, if these are satellite blood drops, then let me ask you something. How is the blood underneath the table? In other words, for the blood to have gotten there and be satellite drops, the table could not have been there. Now the table's there. The question is, who moved the table? Now, if Lindsay moved the table, you have to remember, her hands are covered in blood. She's going to have to pick that table up on two sides. There are no fingerprints, not even bloody ones, on this table.
On today's episode of The Women of the World v. Patrick Clancy, I'm going to prove that Lindsay Clancy's bedroom was staged using Bratz dolls and a shoebox reconstruction of the crime scene, because I noticed something that absolutely nobody else has noticed, not even the blood experts, and if they did notice, they strategically omitted it from their testimony because it proves that Lindsay Clancy is innocent. My only credentials are that my brain works like this, guys.
This is my design.
If you know, you know. And I'm a forensic files enthusiast, back to back. Everyone needs to see this, and the only way that I know how to explain it is by showing you. That's why I made the reconstruction. Please stay with me and watch this, because I'm going to be reenacting the scene the way that I see it when I look at the crime scene. This is your trigger warning. If you're sensitive to domestic violence and blood and graphic detail, do not watch this video. I've managed to semi-accurately dress Lindsay in a black tank top and jeans, but unfortunately my male Bratz doll didn't come with a weaker jawline, and he doesn't have accurate clothing to what Patrick was wearing other than the first pair of shoes, so excuse me for that. First, let's do a quick tour. This is the doorway, this is the navy shelves, represents the mirror, blood spot A, this represents the pillow next to the mirror, the pillowcase next to the mirror. I've just drawn some blue on the floor. Lindsay's slippers, the green tub, assorted linens I've just depicted using just a pencil here just for reference, blood spot B, blood spot C, and our drawers along with our knife.
Very
and I've
important.
roughly indicated where the cups were and the spray bottles.
She went into every detail
there. Then we have our Lindsay, the phone on the bed. Excuse the old vintage phone, wasn't really a thing back when Bratz dolls were made. I saw the theory that Lindsay had the window shut on her neck, but unfortunately I have a more plausible explanation as to what's happened to Lindsay and why her thyroid was crushed, so let's get into it. I've also made sure I can move the bed because it's vitally important, and what kicked this off for me is what I saw when I saw the blood and the bed. Okay, from the top, here's our Lindsay. Our Lindsay is sleeping. I think that the Benadryl in the cup full of lemonade wasn't a suicide attempt, it was a sleep aid. Our Lindsay was sleeping, and she was probably sleeping a long time before this kicked off. What I'm alleging has happened is Lindsay has been rendered unconscious, and that is what has caused her thyroid injury. The safest thing to do was to turn off the Apple Watch to make sure it wasn't tracking any of her movement, because any movement from her part or lack thereof was going to be suspicious. He took the Apple Watch downstairs with him to the basement, turned it back on, and then used it to send himself a work email so that it would be reasonably explained that he had nothing to do with her Apple Watch activity. Then I'm alleging that he dragged her unconscious body to the edge of the bed and sat her facing the mirror because he needed to see what he was doing. His plan was to be able to hold her upright and make every single wound look self-inflicted. When he cut her wrist and caused blood spot A, he realised that it's going to be impossible to keep her limp body upright and keep blood off himself, especially if she started to stir from deep pain stimulus in that wrist. So what does he do? He panics. Our Lindsay is still bleeding off the edge of the bed because her hand has been positioned there. She's unconscious, and he moves the bed, which then causes the blood to travel. Excuse the length ratio here, it's not.
So,
Bed.
at that point, I feel that he moved the bed to position her closer to the window. So as he's angling the bed, he's actually getting the headboard more in front of the window.
Which then causes the blood to travel. Excuse the length ratio here, it's not perfectly to scale, but it explains the blood trail from blood spot A over here without any touching on the bed. Next, what does he do? He gets back on the bed, positions our Lindsay back upright. He knows he still can't get any blood on the bed, but he has to make it look like she's up and standing and moving around voluntarily, right? He struggles to fling her unconscious body, which may or may not have caused the only spatter transfer in the bedroom on the mirror. He then maneuvers her body this way, creating this blood trail up here, and then positions her on the bed, creating blood spot B. After he panicked and dragged the bed, I think that's when the blood spots happened by the door, and that's also when he pressed the push lock.
Yeah.
With bloody.
Or could he have been interrupted by a tot, one of his toddlers? And if they were a witness, would that have been a motive that expanded from just Lindsay to more?
Gloves to make sure the kids couldn't come up and interrupt him. So we've left a trail up to blood spot B. I'm alleging that Lindsay's already bleeding wrist is limp and hanging downwards, and nothing but gravity is causing these passive blood droplets on the floor. So from here, he realizes it's going to be challenging to grab the knife and return it to this side table, which would be his workstation. So what does he do? He moves it. It's possible that during that process, he actually dropped the knife because there was a spatter pattern and some small impact around this little puddle. But I'm not sure the chronology of events. But now he's got access to that bedside, he can reach it, and he can work on this other wrist. He then cuts her right wrist, which creates blood spot C.
Right behind
And
the
again,
bed.
she's limp. Her arms are positioned. Forgive the brat dolls again. They're not going to be exact. But her arms are limp over the bed. That's why he moved the bed, so that he can wedge her and press her up against it. Make sure she stays asleep and make sure she stays still so no blood gets on the bed, meaning no blood gets on him. I'm not sure if he moved the curtain before or after he moved the side table, but this transfer pattern I think is from him with his gloved up hands moving the curtain to the side. So I'm not sure if he did that when he moved the side table or did that just before he put her through the window. It could have been either or. but it's to make room. Same with this curtain here. I'm alleging it was moved out of the way.
Makes sense.
Because there's still blood droplets at the base of where the curtains were, but none on the actual curtains. So I'm thinking they were out of the way. I think he brought her chest up and then he cut her neck. But because he didn't have the mirror to see, he wasn't sure if he cut the carotid artery. That's why it was superficial, but yet still bleeding. Maybe not as actively as the rest, but it's because he can't see. Now he has to get her through the window. So I'm thinking her right wrist went first. And that's what started the transfer pattern here on the exterior of the window, next to that odd orange silicone or whatever it was on the exterior. And from the inside, while he's trying to do that, this wrist is now bleeding more freely in this direction. And he brings her arm over, again being mindful not to get blood on himself. And that's where we see this transfer pattern on the interior of the window. So once her arms are out, he then pushes her forward and she's on by her hips. The reason I don't subscribe to the idea that he slammed her neck in the window is because he needed her unconscious well before that, but also there's no real blood on the center of that window, only
Right.
transfer on the outside and on the inside on opposite sides.
Look at
So he
this.
has her out by her hips. And it's at least a few seconds that she's dangling unconscious here, which is where our exterior blood patterns come from. The prosecution reckons that there was blood in between here, but I disagree. I don't think it looks like blood at all. I think it just looks like general stains on the exterior of the house that have nothing to do with it. And she never tested it, so I'm just ignoring it. So that's not there. Just these two marks that were obviously from her wrist. And then down here on the ledge of the window, where it was obviously from her hands on the way down.
That makes perfect sense.
And then he drops her. And there she is outside on the snow, well in advance of any of this being put into motion. And there he is. He's finished with
Now
Lindsay,
watch.
and now he has to set the rest of the scene. Now here's my smoking gun. The curtains are returned to normal. And he starts to examine the room and try to figure out what looks unnatural. So he moves the bedside table back to where it was. And what does he do? He doesn't realise no blood on the curtain behind it, which is inconsistent with the amount of action going on the surface of that table. But the most important mistake he made is right down here. Because underneath that side table leg are two perfectly circular passive blood drops from
Also known as satellite drops, that could not have happened unless there was nothing between the drops of blood and the floor itself, meaning the dresser couldn't have been there. And so the dresser has been moved.
when he was working on her before. And he's just moved this bedside table directly over the top of those blood stains, which means the scene was staged. Because nowhere in this room, in this situation, in any of this blood, in any of this action, nowhere are Lindsay's fingerprints. If she was bleeding and doing all of this herself, her fingerprints would be on either side of this table. He's moved it and put it back over those blood droplets unknowingly.
That suggests somebody is with Lindsay at the time of the crime. I've often thought that she went out head first. Now it's been confirmed that Lindsay dove out the window. Or was she dropped? If this is right, the simulation, then it would suggest that after she was sedated, that her thyroid may have been manually crushed.
Hers was she had a thyroid crush injury. And crush injuries, there's a very interesting terminology to use because words like that matter to us in the medical field.
Absolutely. In the trauma bay, that's mostly where you're going to hear a crush injury.
Which is very different than like a standard broken bone. Like we will use crush injury as like an actual charted medical terminology, I would say.
And crush injury is different than blunt force trauma. And I think that's important to note.
Yes.
Because blunt force is think of like something that hits you really hard and impactful, like a car accident or a big fall, where crush is like a sustained, prolonged pressure. Wouldn't you say?
So she had a thyroid crush injury. I was just Googling. The Google and I were having a conversation. And it said that it takes substantial force to crush the thyroid. I have seen countless falls. I'm sure you have too. Mainly construction workers or roofers, things like that. I mean, so they come in all the time.
Yeah.
I would say that is probably within the top 3 traumas that we see would be falls. And then just to like set the record, it is different at every hospital, but like a 1-story fall is typically 10 feet, 2 stories is 20 feet, so on and so forth. So in order to activate a trauma, at least at our hospital, it has to be at least 20 feet or 2 stories, which Lindsay met that criteria.
Yes.
I've never seen a thyroid injured as a result of a fall.
I have never.
I have seen thyroids injured in strangulation cases, which is why the hair on the back of my neck went up a little bit when it comes to this injury being found on Lindsay.
Yeah. That with the superficial marks on her neck.
So my question for you is, hypothetically, people had said that the thyroid injury occurred because of the laceration on her neck. But we know that that laceration was so superficial that it didn't even require a suture. The only wound that required a suture was one of the ones on her hands, but that was like days later in the ICU, not immediate.
Right.
A superficial wound to a neck couldn't go deep enough to injure the cartilage of the thyroid or injure the thyroid. Plus, it was documented as being crushed. A laceration would not crush that.
Yes.
So that's out. The fall, unless she happened to land on a rock on her neck and hit that and crushed it, I just don't see how that could have ever occurred from a fall.
I agree.
Okay.
I think that is the one injury that does not make sense with any of like the story, I guess.
Clancy's Apple Watch, because what came out in court today has quite frankly given me the chills. So a digital forensic specialist was asked about the activity that went on Lindsay's watch, specifically her heart rate during the course of January 24. And here's where it gets really interesting. At 4:50 p.m, her heartbeat was 114 beats per minute. 5:02 p.m, it drops to 88 beats per minute. 5:10 p.m, it drops to 77 beats per minute. And at 5:23 p.m, her heart rate drops to 57 beats per minute. And this is the last heart rate ever recorded. Now, what causes a rapid drop like that? One of the medically recognised causes is thyroid suppression and thyroid damage. And here's the part we can't ignore. A person whose heart rate has just rapidly dropped into the 50s is in no fit state to take off their own watch, place it neatly into a drawer, walk up and down the stairs a few times, and then have a normal conversation on the telephone with their spouse 10 minutes later.
You could even start up here at 4:50. It'd be 5:02, 5:10, 5:16, and 5:23. 114, 88, 7, 77, 77, and then 57 as the last known heart rate recorded on the Apple Watch of Lindsay's. And this has been Truth Serum. I'm Danny, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.